Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Hello, bonjour, ami, hola, and welcome to the Fringe North podcast. My name is Caitlin Townsend, and I am the interim artistic producer for this year's festival. My pronouns are she and her. Today, we are just chatting about some of the stuff coming up for festival and also kind of like what it was like. Last week we did on the artist side of things, being in the pandemic, and this week we're going to do more from like running a festival last year during the midst of a pandemic and the impact that that had and our views on how that shaped art and our engagement with it. So to start, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our dear friend, the Fringe North fledgling. So for those of you who have not heard about the fledgling yet, essentially we have a giant stuffed pelican bird that is making its way around the city over the course of July. This bird is being treated as a scavenger hunt, so we have clues on our social media platforms whenever it goes to a new location. So it is very sporadic. Keep an eye out on our socials in order to tell when it's at a new place and to be able to participate. And how you participate is you just go to the location, take a photo with yourself and the bird, and then post it on social media using our hashtags Fringe North 2022 and Fringe North fledgling in order for your chance to be entered into a draw to win some great prizes, including free tickets for the festival to be able to engage with our shows, as well as some other goods from local places around the city. So super exciting initiative. It is already out somewhere in the city today. It's already been to 2 different locations as of today. So really exciting to find this bird and to be able to participate. There's also postcards with him as well, or him or her, or them, I don't know, however you want to refer to this bird. Fringe North fledgling. It has postcards with it as well, so that you can see how to find access to how to participate if you forget like how to enter the draw, because he does have a little name card with the information on it. And then you can take one with you and remember how to post your picture later and get entered into that draw. And there's also information about the festival on there as well, so you can find out more about us and Fringe North and what all is involved with the festival. The other thing I wanted to talk about as well is just a reminder that tickets go on sale August 1st, getting super exciting. We will have more information up on the particular shows involved in the festival as the month goes on, so you can check out our website, www.siouxfringe.com. Super exciting place to be to get all that information, and as of August 1st, you will be able to purchase tickets. So I guess the other piece was Rotary Fest too. I did want to mention we will be at Rotary Fest in the kids zone with a nice little booth and activities for kids, mask making, some be your own busker style games, and there's also some different activities with photo booths as well. So we've got lots of like hats and fun like masks to take pictures with. It'll be a great time. Please stop by and see us and get some swag as well. So yeah, that's pretty much what's going on. I will pass it off to Garrett now to introduce himself too and let you know kind of how today will go for the podcast.
Great. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Garrett Ryan. My pronouns are he, him. I am with Artist Relations this year for Fringe North. And yeah, today what we wanted to do is essentially sort of a successor to last week's artist roundtable. And just we're going to go over some similar topics. I'm sure the conversation's going to go in different directions, but I'm just really excited to chat a little bit about the production side of things. It's going to be interesting for myself because I have inhabited both spaces. So I can offer, experience as an artist and as someone on the production team and talk about how those are similar and different. Yeah, before I have some, actually, you know what, I'm going to go right into the question because I want you to have time to introduce yourself, Mahima, but we'll do this in 1 second. So how I started last week's artist roundtable, if you were able to catch it, is by starting off and just sort of contextualizing who we are and what we do. So last week it was about what we do as artists. This week I want to talk a little bit about what we do as artistic producers. Obviously, in this case, we're going to talk specifically about our roles in Fringe North. And I know that for the two of you, this is different for last year and this year. Your roles may have shifted. So I'm interested to hear about what space you occupied last year and what space you occupy this year on the Fringe North team, and that's going to kind of give our watchers some context for the conversations we're going to be having. So I'll talk a little bit more about my role after, but let's Mahima, if you want to go now, talk a little bit about your role, maybe just a little bit about some of your responsibilities.
So hi everyone, my name is Mahima and my pronouns are she and her, and it's great to be here again on the podcast. So I'm an event coordinator with Fringe North, and I was in the same position last summer as well. Some of the things have shifted, as like last year was more up in the air whether we would be digital, and now this year it is like a hybrid, which is really exciting. So in that sense, it is really different for the festival, like production side of the thing. So that's gonna be very exciting.
Yeah, and what about yourself, Kaylin? I know you have shifted quite a bit from last year, from what I understand.
Yeah, in some ways, and in some ways, I mean, running a festival and being a small organization our size, you're always kind of doing all of the things to some extent. So yeah, last year I was the project coordinator for the festival, and then this year I'm the interim artistic producer. So I have stepped in just for 1 year while we go through a little bit of a transition and trying to decide where we're headed as an organization, and just for sake of people not burning out as well. So excited to be in that role this year and to just be able to help out with that as an organization. I think in terms of, I guess, roles being different this year, I have more hours for one, which is nice. And with running a festival is always like a lot of hours. Also more of like overseeing some of the other teams, whereas last time I was spending a lot of time in like the festival production camp. So it is a little bit more, I feel like rather than being necessarily like in a fully new role, it's just adding on to part of what I was already doing last year, is sort of what it feels like. And yeah, it's kind of like exciting and glad to be here and to have like that vast experience in the different roles within the company and just be constantly learning and growing. That's one of the things that I love about Fringe North, is just it's a really good place to get some hands-on learning, and also like the planning and theoretical side before we actually jump in with the hands-on learning. And it's just always that growth mindset, and always growing as human beings and people, and not just the work we do, but also like inwardly as well, which I think is a really cool thing. And really beneficial to the arts, and actually ties in quite nicely with what we're going to be talking about today. So I won't go too much further with that right now, but yeah, it's great to be here and to be a part of the festival.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, both of you, for sharing that. For myself, as I said, I'm with artist relations. Basically, what that has entailed so far is I am just the go-to for any artist questions or concerns. I've also been working with the artists to facilitate podcasts, to get them in the roundtable. We've only had that once, but you're going to see more artists coming in this roundtable Thursdays in the coming weeks. And yeah, essentially, I can sum up my role as just making sure artists are comfortable and having a fulfilling experience with Fringe North. I'm curious. So this is my first year working with the team. Have either of the two of you worked with Fringe North pre-COVID? I didn't think so. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, so it'll be interesting to talk about doing this kind of production work pre-COVID. I think we can probably offer some experiences outside of Fringe North. Oh, sorry, my computer just went very strange. We can, yeah, offer some of our experiences with other positions in other companies or organizations. I certainly can talk a little bit about my experience running my own theater company, and what that has entailed and how that shifted during the pandemic. So I guess jumping into that, what did it look like for the two of you? Because especially starting at sort of the height of the pandemic, if not the height, at least a higher point than we're at now, however arbitrary that measurement is. What did it look like getting hired on at that point of, I would argue, more uncertainty than we're at now, even though, we're still, there's maybe some more waves coming. We don't know what's going to happen. But I think last season especially, it was a lot more up in the air. So if either of you want to talk a little bit about, like, what was it like starting in that environment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think for me, when I came on, I was actually the first non-seasonal staff that was ever hired on to Fringe North in a paid position. So very strange, because you have the newness of like being in a pandemic and how theater plays out in that context, and then also like very much a new step for the organization as a whole, and very different than anything that had been experienced previously, because it was Fringe is run, and like Fringe across the globe as well, often run by volunteers mainly. There are paid positions at most Fringes, but it does, because there is such that emphasis on volunteers, it does take a few years when you're starting a new Fringe to often get to that space. So normal progression for a Fringe organization, but just like I happened to be thrown into the mix at that time for Fringe North. And it was very, very kind of strange for a number of reasons, in terms of like it being a pandemic, you're working remotely. They never had a paid position outside of festival season, so I got hired on in the fall of 2020. So not really knowing how to fully navigate that, because it is a new thing that's never been done before for the organization. And so there was like that learning curve and like growth there. And then also, like, for me, from my background, I have never done like film production theater production. I come from a space of doing film. When I was in university, I ran the film club, and we kind of had two parts. We had watching films, and then every second meeting was actually creation of films. So I come more from that production side of making films rather than theater and plays. But growing up, my cousins and I would have it started out as plays that we would do every time we got together, and then we would like plan them and do them for like the parents afterwards. And we would spend like all of our days, we would usually spend 2 weeks together over Christmas and just like making plays and then presenting them. But what happened was our parents got sick of like us coming up whenever we felt necessary, and was like, hey, you have to watch it like now because we're ready to go. So they gave us the camcorder. So we actually started turning those into plays, but it puts me in a really unique position, especially for the pandemic, because when we were what we were actually creating, I would say, is theater. Because if you compare it to like film, it did not have that film feel. We had like the stage, and we would go on it and just like film, and we would do different cut scenes and that, like, you do have the advantages. But like, to me, one of the interesting things about the pandemic was it really started to highlight that yes, a large part of theater is presenting in front of an audience and building off of their responses to things, but also it's a completely different style of acting compared to like the actual film industry that has like a very more like not breaking the fourth wall as often. There are some films that do it, but like in general, film is very much that we're going to pretend that this is like you're watching someone's life unfold, whereas with theater there's more of that like back and forth and like playing with camera angles and like those different feels. And like the heart of theater is a lot more than just that live audience. The live audience feeds into it, because often with the heart of style of acting, you can like mold to what's happening with your audience, which you don't really get in the digital sphere. But it really did, the pandemic started to highlight those elements of theater that highlight the heart of theater going beyond just the presence of an audience. So I was really excited for that, and like the conversations I was having with artists too, who rightfully so, some of them were very frustrated about having to shift because it's not what they were used to and not thinking about theater in that way. And I completely understand and get it. And I'm not saying like, oh, no one should care because there's other parts of theater beyond just the audience. Like, that's not what I'm getting at all. What I'm saying is like it started to highlight some of those things for everyone, and to recognize the other differences between just having a live audience or not. And I think our culture has often pushed that, has the difference between theater and film, when there's so many more layers added onto that. So being brought on when I was kind of like really excited, because I was like, it felt like going back to my childhood and the way that we used to do films that was so critiqued because it wasn't the normal way to do films, that now everyone suddenly in the pandemic in the theater world is doing that style of creating digital theater. So I felt like my entire childhood was like normalized in that sense, and the way that we had been going about how we approached it, and it felt like home to me, and was super exciting to get involved with Fringe North when I did, because of that element. And also like having the excitement that I did about it, being able to, last year I think I had some really good conversations with some of our artists who were a little bit more hesitant and kind of still experimenting with, well, what does this look like on film, and like pulling that out and talking to them about how, like, your craft isn't defined just by your audience. Like there's so many other layers. And I get that audiences are very appreciated in theater worlds. And like, yes, now that we have the option to do things in person, of course, we're all going to take advantage of that and do that again. But to start to unpack some of those layers and the conversations that came out of that was really wonderful and a nice space to be in. And I got called a couple times last year, like, oh, you're such a good like encourager. But to me, it's like, I'm not trying to encourage, it's just, this is what I grew up with in my version of digital theater from my childhood. So it felt like coming home, and felt like it felt like the perfect timing for me to get involved with Fringe. And I think it was just like very much the universe just being like, this is the time and place and needs to happen now. And I think had I gotten involved sooner, there would have been a little bit more of a disconnect with me, because I wouldn't have seen myself as I guess like more of that imposter syndrome of like, oh, I'm not from the theater world, so what am I doing working for like a theater-based organization? And I know now at Fringe North, for those of you who have been following us, we really have expanded to include other multidisciplinary arts in our festival, because it's what works for our area. But the Fringe network is very much theater focused for the most part. So I think I would have felt a lot more out of place if it wasn't a pandemic, and I'm not sure how I would have fit in, or if I would have stuck around, or if I would have even accepted the job to begin with, or what that would have looked like. The timing was just what it needed to be, in my opinion. So yeah, it was strange in some ways, because it was like that first step for the organization, but also like exciting in other ways, because it felt like I belonged in a space that maybe in other contexts I might not have felt fully like I was home quite as in the same way as I did, based on being in that pandemic scenario.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's very interesting that you came to the job with that sort of childhood experience. Um, I think that's a really good perspective to have, and a really important perspective to have for the artists and the companies participating in Fringe North, because one of the things that I've always been, sometimes it's been hard to stick with this philosophy, but something I've tried to stick with and tried to share often is that the digital shift shouldn't be looked at as a detriment. It should be looked at as an exciting opportunity. And it really has been for a lot of artists an opportunity to experiment and push the bounds of what constitutes theater. And what differentiates it from film, because I agree, doing theater doesn't become film just by having a camera present. Film is its own medium. Like they're doing their own thing. When I had to make the digital shift as an artist, and we did our first production, which was like multi-camera, like cut, edited, filmed over like a few weeks. And even then, even though it kind of presented itself like a film, I didn't view it as filmmaking. I still viewed it as theater, because I was coming to it from a very theatrical approach. So it gets blurry a little bit in trying to differentiate them. But it's interesting though. I don't know, is theater defined by having an audience? I don't necessarily think so, or having a live audience. Because I think if someone is doing theater on a stage with no audience, you're still doing theater. It's the tree falling in the forest, that comparison. Like, do you need an audience for it to be theater, or do you need a live audience for it to be theater in the room? I don't think so. And I think a lot of people have realized that it can still be theater without having that immediate reception. That, even though that's great, I love having an audience, but it's still, there's different ways to approach it. Anyway,
and there's
yeah.
There was a lot of pushback too, and I get like artists who had like an idea for a show that then it's not going to translate the same way into digital theater has. So like you do have to treat it as it is a different, like you can't like throw out objects into your audience like you can in a theater space in a way that you can digitally. It physically doesn't work. So like there are certain detriments depending on what you were planning on doing. And I think that's where people got tripped up, was they already had like their next project in mind, and suddenly you can't do it in that context. So I think a lot of the pushback of, oh, it's not true theater, actually came from that place of, my project no longer works in this context, which is fair. But like even, and I think it's always been around, like we're treating it as like this new thing, but like look at kids shows. There's so many like theater-based kids programming versus like actual like movies for kids, which are two different things. But like I think somewhere along the way it just never got translated when adult films, like, and by adult films I mean films for adult, not anyways. Like it never got translated, whereas like kids entertainment always did have that option of like film versus like a theater piece that's digital. Like there was a show on Treehouse where there was like these raggedy dolls and whatnot, and it was like people like acting, and it was very like theater feel versus like I don't know, like something like Arthur, where it's very much like you're watching something unfold. It's not like that engaging piece, or like the craft shows for kids that they would often break that wall and like talk to the kids on the other side of the screen. So I think it's always been there and the opportunity has been there, but we just haven't, like the pandemic forced us to open our eyes to it, because somewhere along the lines it got put into like, oh, this is a thing that's for kids, that then like it's not for adults, that we never created adult versions of like theater pieces until we had to, which is interesting.
Yeah, for sure. Mahima, do you have I guess jumping back to the we've started progressing, but jumping back to your experience, what was it like coming on board during the pandemic for you? And I know you've had some interesting experiences within artistic management type stuff, but outside of theater. So if you want to talk about that, I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, so when I started, it was like last year, May-ish. It was a much smaller team, and then it became larger in the coming weeks. But it was really different because we were working from home, but I'm located in Mississauga, which is pretty far from the Sioux. And I also come from like a non-arts background. So that was also like a really big barrier. And I feel the same way as Caitlin. Like if it wasn't during the pandemic and if it wasn't online, I would feel like a bit intimidated, like, wow, this is a theater position, something that I've never like been into before. But I do love event planning, and I come from that background. So I think that really like helped shape my role here. And like, I guess like starting from when I started, it was like a smaller team, and then we started to see like everything kind of come together. Like it was also a time where we weren't sure like what was happening with like digital, in person, and like what like literally everything would be like. So it was just nice to see like all the team being brought on, having like so many artists. Again, like that was something that the pandemic also allowed for, like having artists from all around the world, basically. Like I remember last year we had people from Australia, artists from India. Like it was just the pandemic, like it wasn't like a barrier, but it like brought new opportunities that wouldn't have happened like otherwise, which was really nice. So I also feel like last year was also probably the best time to get involved for Fringe with me, since everything fit together. So that was really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you also mentioned participation from all over the world is something that, yeah, you're right. This is something that couldn't have been done it's interesting because it could have been done pre-pandemic, but it wouldn't have been done. It was only, we've opened this space up because of the pandemic. If someone from, like you said, that there was participating artists from India, if someone from India contacted us a few years ago pre-pandemic and said, can we put a show in your festival, but only make it digital? We would have gone we probably would have said no, because that's not really a thing that was done in Fringe festivals. Where now it's become the norm, and we have a lot wider of a pool of participating artists, which is fantastic. That's super cool. Yeah, India, Australia, like that's, I was gonna say that's so far away. Obviously, that's so far away, but just like yeah, I don't have anything profound to say aside from the fact that it's just really cool, and I'm really glad.
Yeah, it's not like a distance, like I know like other artists usually like drive around for fringes, but like coming from there, like you can't really drive across the ocean, so that's
exactly
really nice.
yeah. And
well,
there so expensive, like for a fringe artist, there's no way I could afford to fly to Australia, and probably someone in my economic bracket would not be able to fly here from Australia. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the important piece, because there are fringe artists who do tour the globe and tour fringes globally, but that accessibility piece isn't possible, and not everyone can afford to do that, and especially when you're starting out. So to me, it's it allows for that accessibility, and not just on like the artist side of things, but when we are living up north, sometimes people aren't able to travel to here, because like if you're coming from overseas, you're not always going to go to like the smaller towns. So also for patrons who get to come out and enjoy our art, we get to see like a lot more diversity, and people who are just starting out their careers that maybe wouldn't have been able to come. Like we early on with Fringe, we did have someone come from England who was touring through, and like you do get those touring artists, but it's those who can afford it. And if we're trying to be that accessibility piece, it needs to be not just for like patrons, but also for the artists who just cannot travel that far. But also it opens the world for like Sault Ste. Marie is a smaller town. Sometimes people aren't willing to come here, but like we now can access that, and it doesn't feel as isolating for patrons either. And we get to like open up to what is possible for us to engage with on the viewer side of art as well. Yeah,
and this is great for Sault Ste. Marie in general as well. This piece of opening it up globally. So if you're from Sault Ste. Marie and you're passionate about expanding tourism and expanding sort of the knowledge of Sault Ste. Marie and bringing in more people, donate to our festival, because we're going to keep trying to do this. We're going to keep bringing in more people. We have I remember one of the calls I did with one of our participating artists earlier this year, knew of the festival but had no idea where Sault Ste. Marie was. And this is a person that is, they were from America, and I said we're right up above Michigan, pretty much. I guess that's the way to describe it. And it's a beautiful city. We have all this. It's and now we have a new person who knows about Sault Ste. Marie, and we have his audience that's going to come in and learn about Sault Ste. Marie. And that's super exciting. We're getting the name of the city out there while we're giving these artists a platform. So it's great for the digital piece doesn't matter as much in that way for a city like Toronto, but for a city like the Sioux, I think it's very important.
Yeah, and especially because like participating digitally can also be like a first step for someone who doesn't, like, especially on the other side of the globe, you're not necessarily going to come across and think like, oh, Sault Ste. Marie is my go-to destination for travel. But once they have that connection, people are more willing to come places, and it feels like home, even though they haven't physically been here. If you've been able to like participate and you feel part of like the Fringe North family, at least I hope we really exude that like vibe. I've heard it from a couple artists. I hope everyone starts to view us that way, because we really do, like, artists are at the heart of our festival team, and just like wanting to support artists as well. And we really appreciate all of the wonderful artists who have reached out and been part of our festival. So to be able to like see some of them in the flesh someday when when they are able to come through, like that's gonna be exciting. And like I view it as like, I know this is my job, but it's like meeting a friend for the first time, and like getting to see, and like even like coworkers. So I've been working at Fringe for 2 years, and I just met my coworkers in town for the first time a couple weeks ago when we went out physically to the museum to see our
Is
location.
that really
And
the first time?
yeah,
Wow,
I
that's wild.
yeah, everything else has been digital for
Yeah, I guess.
almost 2 full years. So
Wow, that's very interesting.
yeah,
Yeah, and
it's a really
like
weird feeling.
we've never met in person, and none of us have met in person, I don't believe. No.
No, I
Yeah.
didn't either.
August. Yeah. That's an interesting thing as well. That's a weird element of COVID in general. Is I've done a few shows with people fully digitally, people that have yet to meet in person, or people that I've done like worked so closely with for like every day of the week doing digital rehearsals, like, you know, building that relationship, and then having never met them in person or meeting them in person like months later or something like that. It's very strange.
Mhm.
Um,
Can
yeah,
I
that's
ask a question about that?
yeah.
Am I allowed to ask questions as well? Okay.
Yeah.
For how does that, so if you're doing like your first rehearsals in that digitally, like chemistry on stage for like a lot of play, and I'm not even talking like usually that term's used in terms of like romance on stage, but like also just like if you're goofing off and pretending to be best friends with someone in a scene, how does that translate when you've only been like interacting digitally and then having to like physically get into a space and have that same level of like chemistry that it seems like you've been friends for years, or like any of the different things that can come up? How does that work?
Yeah, so I have been lucky in that the shows that I have done, even if I haven't met the people, the actors have known each other previously. So for the one show I just referenced was 2 years ago now, I get, or no, it would have been a year and a bit ago, was the like big production that the university does every year, or one of the two big productions. So I was an assistant director on the show, and the cohort of actors had known each other in the acting conservatory for the whatever 3 years prior until the pandemic hit. So for that case, that chemistry, those relationships were already there and formed, which was nice. It's when I did another show that was like a radio play, and the actors did know each other. At least some of them did. There's one pairing that I'm not sure if they ever met in person prior, and it's different for sure, because a lot of the things I do as a director to create that chemistry is I'll do exercises, and a lot of exercises are sort of contingent on rhythm and pace and picking up on each other's energies, and none of those things are available on Zoom. So like I had to really be creative with trying to figure out alternatives that would work. But yeah, it's definitely a different kind of, it's a different world for sure doing that kind of digital creation. The play I'm working on right now, we started doing read-throughs on Zoom, but then we were able to eventually start rehearsing in person. So I would say that the chemistry was only really developed once we hit that in-person piece. But if you know from the beginning that you're doing a rehearsal process all online, you just have to be adaptable, I think, and figure out other ways to establish that chemistry. Yeah, like it would, I think about, this is a really random example, I guess, but people that have like an online long distance relationship, they're not going to have the same kind of I guess chemistry, that would be the same term. They don't have the same kind of chemistry that someone would have in a relationship in person, but it's different, and it's no less strong, it's just different. So you have to be able to figure out how that difference works, but once you figure it out, it comes pretty naturally.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of like the show, this is gonna, no judgment please viewers, but like Love is Blind, where they like meet between a wall and then they get engaged and then meet in person afterwards. But yeah, they all like have like this weird, and like I don't think any of them are like, oh, I suddenly don't want to be with you. Like it's never a situation like that, but it's just like when you meet in person, there's like that couple of hours where they have to like get used to like being in each other's space physically versus like talking through a wall. Or yeah, like it's an interesting thing as human beings, like our space that we embody.
Yeah, for sure. I've met people, I guess in a similar way, like doing university. I did university, like my bachelor's, sort of not more than half in person, and then a little bit at the end during the pandemic. But I've done the entirety of my master's degree on all digitally, and there's been people that I've like met. I have met them that has only been digital, and has also been people that for whatever reason don't have access to cameras or can't use cameras. So I do know people in that way where I've never seen what they look like, but I've had to build at least a type of rapport with them, which is very interesting. There's someone that I've never met in person and I don't know what they look like. I just know their little name in a box and have to sort of learn how to work with them and build that relationship.
And I feel like when in like digital spaces, like it's mainly like communication is more key, since like you're not actually used to like seeing them at all. Like I had similar experiences as well in university. Half of my degree was also online.
Yeah.
But it was so different. Like I guess like it's even more weird to see them just as names and then seeing them actually in person, because then you have no idea what to expect. It's kind of like reading a book and then trying to like imagine everything, and then you see the movie come out and like it's like really different from what you thought, like the image you had in your mind. So I feel like it's so
one of the things that I love about meeting someone in person, and one of the games I liked to play sort of in my own head when I've been in like Zoom classes or whatever with someone 2 days a week for a year, is try to figure out by this sort of view how tall someone is. That's something that I always loved when I met someone in person after getting to know them digitally, is seeing them in person and being completely shocked by their height. I've had both ways. I've been shocked by how short people are and by how tall people are as well, because that's something you can't really gauge on Zoom.
A good point. I have really enjoyed that aspect because I'm actually under 5 feet and I'm like super short.
I would have, no world would I have guessed that. Yeah,
same as well.
I'm like just under by like half an inch, but still.
This is what I love. See, that genuinely shocks me. I have no, there's no perception of that. How tall do you think I am? I feel like you've seen me on stage though, so maybe that's
different. Yeah. So it's
digital.
A little bit different, but are you asking for like actual feet? I don't know like height. Like I'm, I actually in my mind whenever I'm like figuring out feet, I use like Subway sandwiches. That still.
Fair.
Where am I like? Are like you like
10? I don't know. 5'11".
I feel like you're around 6 because you were walking by someone at one point in your camera.
3.
I was gonna say 5'2".
I'm 5'3", like 5'4", 5'3".
Wow, you're
pretty average.
I nailed that.
Awesome.
That's really fun. Oh, I'm happy I got that. Okay, we've drifted a little bit, but this is still an interesting conversation. So I guess to jump back into it. Here's a question that I was interested in asking the artist this last week, but we never got to it. So I will pose it here because I actually think it's a bit more relevant to us. What is our responsibility as artistic producers at this point in the pandemic, where we're sort of in this place where we are in this kind of gray area between waves where things are looking good and we're moving away from all these restrictions? How do we balance this need to perform, this need for liveness that is clearly present in a lot of people with the health and safety of our artists. That's a question that I know we've been having a lot, a discussion we've been having a lot behind the scenes, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think ultimately where we're at right now in the pandemic, and this shifts almost like daily, it seems, over the past 2 years, but like, is that real awareness that we still are in a pandemic, because so many people are just so eager to get out of it that we just like push it aside and pretend it's not happening, and that we're done COVID. Well, we're actually not, and it comes in waves. We know that at this point too, and the accessibility piece. So wanting to make things as safe and comfortable, and recognizing that people have different safety levels too. So just transparency with like where we're at and how things are going to be. Also having the options, and I think this is kind of moving into where we are now, but also moving forward, always making sure to have those digital options. I think it's really important, not just from the artist side of being able to support ones who can't afford to travel here, or ones who just, some people aren't comfortable in front of an audience. So sometimes having that option of like, oh, I can perform and be me, but do it on tape, and then I don't have to do it in front of an audience. There's also the element of just like, so I myself struggle with an autoimmune disease, and it takes a lot out of you. So I imagine that artists in my circumstance might not know when they can perform. Like, until the day of, you don't know if you're going to be bedridden or not. And when you're living that kind of like lifestyle, it allows you to still work and to produce art and still have like that digital piece, as well as if you're on the patron side of things, you don't know if you're going to be able to buy a ticket and go somewhere because you might be bedridden that day. So to have like that option that you can't make it out to a show, you can watch a digital piece, you can still participate, and to still give it that like not a secondary spot in terms of like, oh well, we're just keeping digital for like the secondary option, but to actually have both as equally important, and to keep those options so that it doesn't feel like you're getting thrown into the side. Like, that's one of the things I've struggled with where we're at in the pandemic, like in my personal life right now, because like so many of the things that I was involved in for entertainment are shutting down, or they're still happening, but like only 2 people show up a week versus like the 10 or 20 that used to be coming online. And it feels very, it makes you feel like a second class citizen when it's not like prioritized and there aren't ways to integrate. Whereas there's also been groups that I've been involved in through the pandemic that have kept that hybrid model in a way that's not, oh, we're offering this as a secondary if you can't make it in person. It's actually both treated. They have like different people running each side of the event, so that there are like things as simple as chat systems make things feel so much more live and not secondary, because it's not just like throwing it to the side, but you can still like chat and communicate. Yeah, so to be really mindful of that going forward, as well as like recognizing right now that it's not always about just health issues right now. Some people just don't feel comfortable going out, and that's okay. That's your right to be in that place right now. And I think a lot of people are like getting shamed for that, like, oh, you're not willing to go out now, like we're past that, you should be okay going out in the community, when no, everybody's allowed to have the comfort level that they have, and that should be respected. And again, respected in like a wholehearted way, not like secondary as like, oh well, they're there, if you're okay not going out, we'll give you this side thing, but like treated as, oh, what's going to help you feel safe and welcomed and part of the community. And I think as we form our live portion of the festival too, which I will willingly say to everyone that it's still up in the air, and we're still making decisions around that, because we want to be really mindful of how we approach that. But like doing it in a way that considers those different comfort levels, and having options for how people can engage, and not shaming someone. Like, usually in a Fringe environment, we really want people to come out for the whole day and enjoy multiple shows. But if you're only comfortable out for a short time and then feeling like, oh, I need to like, I'm not used to being around people this much, like all of those things are very real coming out of the pandemic. So not shaming people for that or making them feel belittled, but to make them feel like, oh, you can only come for one. Like we're happy to have you for one. We're excited that you're even coming for one. And to have that mindset of like, how you want to participate in the community is your choice, and it's going to be respected with open arms, and we're going to do what we can to, recognizing still that you can't please everyone. It's just the nature of where things are right now. So we're doing our best, but we know that someone will be disappointed at some point about something, and we're just doing our best to provide options and creative alternatives where we can, but it's not humanly possible to have all the options. It just, especially with a small team our size. So doing what we can to make everything feel safe and community centric, and whatever version of community that feels like for you, giving people a space to provide their voice. So one example of this is on our website, our new website that for those, www.sufringe.com. Oh, it's on my name as well. Yeah, if you check out our website, there is a feedback form that if there is something that you're concerned about and want to know more about, you can reach out to us. We can let you know if there is a way for us to work around, or if there's not, how you can feel involved, whether that is participating on more on the digital side. We're always open to hearing people's feedback and voices. And like I said, we can't make everyone feel 100% confident, and we can't please everyone 100% of the time because we're human beings, but like, we do want to have those channels so that we can do the best that we can with the size of team that we have and the abilities that we have to hear voices. So feel free to check out our website and send us a form if you do have thoughts in that department, and we will be keeping everyone updated as we make those. And I think that's really the best we can do for where we are right now. And yeah, I think I hope that like fully answers your question, Garrett. I think it does, but it's sort of like also like not directly answering it, but just like, yeah, doing the best we can to create community and make people feel comfortable.
Yeah, no, I think that was a fantastic answer. I think that really encapsulates a lot of the conversations that we've been having as a team. Mahima, do you have anything to add? Or
I think Caitlin covered a lot of it. Basically, like, I think we really try to make our like accommodate the best, like accommodate our artists as much as we can, and like see what they're safe with COVID. Like, and the fact that it's all up in the air, like it seems like cases are increasing again, like there's a new variant, like everything's just changing with this pandemic. So I think we just try our best and like try to like have contingency plans in place and like just have everything kind of prepared. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's never ending, but you know, the best we can do is be prepared and be flexible, and I think we're doing that. I hope we're doing that. I know we are. I know we're really trying at the very least to be championing that understanding and compassion.
Yeah, I think sorry if I can jump in quickly.
Please.
Another element that I want to highlight for all of our viewers is that we do have this year, for artists who applied, there was a guarantee artist, I guess like honorarium, for even if they don't sell tickets, they get that money. If for any reason we do end up having to shut down, worst case scenario, which I don't foresee happening. I think it's just having those contingency plans as to how it plays out. But just so everyone's aware, our artists will get that money and they will get paid. And if that means shifting to digital, it means shifting to fully digital, whatever that would look like. So that I think is really important to us as well, so that artists aren't putting time and energy into something that in this level of uncertainty, they don't really know how it's going to play out. So which I would encourage everyone to, for like Tip the Fringe, like we like to support artists in that way, but that means that it comes at like our expense as a festival. So if you feel like it can be hard to donate to certain things in the pandemic because you're like, I don't know what's going to happen with this money, we are still 100% supporting our artists where we can. And it's, yeah, so if that gives you any comfort in donating right now, feel free to reach out and Tip the Fringe, because we really can only do that if we do have the finances to do it. So
Great. Yeah, absolutely. I want to ask as well, as sort of a follow-up. Do you think as an arts organization, as an arts and cultural organization, do we have sort of an extra level of responsibility in addressing these concerns, as sort of, I guess, an organization that prides itself on being that, or having that sense of accessibility kind of ingrained into what we do, and also as like just by merit of being an arts and culture organization, kind of having that influence, like do we have any extra level of responsibility because of that, because like we want to be that that really positive influence on the society, on the community?
I've talked a lot, so Mahima, if you want to go first, but I do have thoughts.
So I think, well, we do. So basically, like, I think like we're kind of like the middle people in a way, like trying to communicate with artists and like trying to like follow policies and like trying to make everything work. So I think we do have more responsibility in trying to communicate what's going to happen and like what we're working on. So
Mhm. Caitlin, you want to share anything as well?
Yeah, I think at the heart of it, it's not, to me, it's not so much about being arts and culture, but wanting to be that accessibility place and that place of
Yeah.
safety, creating safe spaces and that place of home, because people can't feel home where they don't feel like they're safe and being taken care of. And to me, the nature of fringe festivals, like so many fringe artists will say like the fringe circuit is my home, and like that is very common. And I think it's more about like our heart for people and our care for people, and as an organization wanting to have that heart for people. And so I think of, so for those of you who don't know, I also have a life coaching company called Abraham's Fortune that I work through as well. And I think it's like that same level of thought process in terms of like, is it safe to meet with clients face to face? Is it going to put them at risk? Is it safer to do all digital? And like thinking through those things, and what's going to make people feel like at home and welcomed, and like it's their community, not just our community, and we're just like telling you how it's going to be, but like that it's this two-way street. And to me, it's that part of Fringe that makes it more our responsibility to take those things seriously, because there are always those different layers and different opinions that people have, and like balancing all that, which can be a difficult juggling act in and of itself. But if we're going to create that space that feels like home, we need to be attentive and aware and mindful of those different layers and ways to invite people into places that truly feel safe and meaningful, and that it's their home, not just our home that we're welcoming them into, but like their genuine home.
Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree. Just noticing what time it is, I want to ask one more question as sort of a way to get into the conclusion of this topic. There's a lot of pressure, I think, that falls on us in producing this festival, especially during these times where we have all these things to worry about. And I said this to Tova as well 2 weeks ago when we did our sort of interview in this live session. So I'm gonna ask to the two of you as well. What is something that the two of you do to kind of get your mind, not necessarily get your mind off this very kind of loaded work that we're doing, but just as a way to sort of decompress outside of work, to sort of manage that work-life balance. I suspect you might have especially an interesting answer to this, Caitlin, because you do life coaching as well. But yeah, I'm very interested, because I think it would be very helpful for anyone else that is doing this kind of work that we're doing, producing art in any way during pandemic times. It's taxing. It's we have a lot more on our plates than we did pre-pandemic. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
So I think I can probably start. So I think, especially since it's like a work from home position, I find that I kind of think about Fringe almost all the time. And I start like writing notes on my phone if like I'm not in front of my computer, like, oh, like I have to remember to do this, or like a small note or an idea. So I think like just like the idea of like having always like that on my mind, I think, and like the way to like kind of get that off my mind would be like kind of trying to have hobbies outside, or like trying to make time that I don't like think about Fringe. I try not to think about Fringe, I guess, or like trying to not do work. So I guess that's really important. But for me, like personally, so I just came back off of vacation, and like I think even like right after vacation, I was like, oh, I was so thrilled to like start working like properly again. So I feel like it's like a lot of fun for me, in my opinion. So it was just really thrilling to like start again. So it's really nice.
Yeah, I have a little bit of a similar answer. So yeah, like my mind is always on Fringe, and with being in like I my office space, like my desk that I'm at right now is also in my bedroom. You can see my bed behind me with pillows, but it creates like this thing where you're never actually fully unplug. So it is hard to, but also like even when I do go out and try and like get my mind off Fringe, like there's always pieces of my mind that are on it, but also like sometimes it does get taxing and tiring and I do have to be mindful of it, but also for me it's a really exciting thing. So I have my life coaching business and then I have my Fringe work as well, and what I find is that jumping into the other helps me unplug from the other, even though it's all work and like a lot of work. It's fun and it helps me like reframe, but also like I see art as very integral to like healing and part of that like expression of things that people have gone through. So I see them as very closely tied together at the same time, which means I do have to be very mindful because it is heavy work, and being a life coach too is also heavy work. So it's like that sense of, I guess, for to use a cliche, like the weight of the world always being on your shoulders a little bit. So trying to really be mindful of letting things unfold and still being a part of them, but not like, to me it's about like unplugging from needing to be like the control of it or have all the answers, just like being a part of it and not observing, but just like being able to jump in when you need to, but also like letting things be and letting things unravel naturally. um Another element that I find really helpful is just like having those moments of just pause throughout like a work day, especially when I do have the two jobs and jumping between them, even if it's just 5 minutes to just like, okay, deep breath, deep breathing, meditation, useful too. I also play ukulele, which has been like something I picked up in the pandemic. I am one of those people that like went out and learned a new instrument because it was a pandemic. But I had actually started learning guitar before, a little while before the pandemic, but when I got my autoimmune disease, like my joints are often swollen up. So I can't, I physically can't make the chords. I also have really tiny, very tiny hands. I have like the world's like tiniest hands. And so much so that at my previous job, a coworker was like, "Oh, people used to make fun of my hands," and like hers, mine, like the, you know how you have like the different layers on your fingers? Mine only went to like the top, like the first line on her finger, and she's like, "Your hands are so small." But yeah, so guitar was difficult, and then when I got my autoimmune disorder, it was just like physically incapable. So picking up the ukulele, and one thing that I have noticed is like actually creating songs and making music rather than just like producing for people to express their art, actually expressing myself through art, has been a really good way to unwind and feel like part of a bigger picture rather than just like the weight of like shouldering all of the burdens. So that to me has been helpful. And the other final layer that I'll mention is like, for me, for those who don't know, like I have a pretty dark past, came from like a rough upbringing. My brother's in jail for pretty severe charges and whatnot. And having been through like all of that, I find listening to other people's stories, not just like art stories where it's like fictitious writing that's like based on true events, but like also like real stories. Like for me, and I know this sounds like very pop culture, but like the listening to the Depth Heard trial was very healing and a way for me to unplug from my work because it normalized some of what I've been through and normalized the extent of like what other people are facing in the world, that it was really like helpful to, well, it was like ongoing. So I had COVID, we had just hired on the team. It was like chaotic time to like be sick with COVID, dealing with like bringing on team members and being in this new position where I'm responsible for like all of the team members. So that was like my unplug, was to like watch and process some of what I had been through in a new way. So it wasn't processing my own stuff, it was processing it like through something else that was happening to someone else. So I actually ended up combining all those elements and writing a song on the ukulele that just helped me really heal from some of my past, but also with me in particular, I find that my past really plays into the stressors of the present. So when I am feeling like that weight of the world, recognizing like, hey, if I got through this stuff, like even if things don't go like perfectly right and something does go awry and an artist doesn't have like a good time, it's going to be okay for them. They'll get through it too. And to like kind of have that awareness and that like tying the past into the present and that like healing journey, I guess would be a way of framing that was really helpful to me, is to like not always have just like that unplug from it, but to find a way to process it through the other things of your other areas of your life, so that when you try and like unplug, sometimes when you plug back in, then like all that stress is still there. Whereas if you can integrate these things so that you're actually like not just unplugging from the burdens at work, but like truly de-stressing and processing what that means, and kind of reframing your mind around how you're viewing that thing that you're seeing as stress, so that you no longer actually see it as quite a stressful thing, that it's just part of the process and part of the journey. So yeah, that's kind of like how I approach it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, thank you both so much for sharing. I really hope those sharings and the sharing from Tova that we talked about, go back and watch that episode 2 weeks ago. We kind of had this conversation as well. I really hope that's helpful for people watching. It can be useful if you're in a similar position doing some kind of arts administration type stuff, if you're working as an artist, or if you're doing any kind of work that's in the pandemic. I think we're all, as you both said, we're very privileged to have this job, be working with this organization, because you're right, the majority of the time it's great, it's fantastic. It's not, you don't feel the stress because you're having a great time doing the work, but sometimes just due to the nature of the times we're living in, it can build up and sneak up on you. So I think it's great to keep all that in mind. I think it's healthy to be aware, be conscious of that stress that can kind of sneak up on you, and have these outlets in your back pocket to address. So noticing the time, I would love to keep chatting, but I think we should probably wrap up. So yeah, I guess maybe Caitlin, if you want to take it away and talk a little bit about anything we need to share before we finish up for the day.
Yeah, so keep an eye out for the Fringe North fledgling. Again, follow us on our socials to be able to see where that's appearing and to win some really awesome prizes, including tickets to the festival. If you don't happen to be the winner of the draw, tickets do go on sale August 1st. So you can purchase those on our website, www.siouxfringe.com, which is down below in my name. And also to keep an eye out for us at Rotary Fest. So that is happening from the 14th to the 16th of July. So very soon, next week. And we will be in the kids zone. You can come by and find us there, and to pick up a free bookmark, and to just enjoy some of the arts and crafts and be your own busker style activities that we have there. Really excited. Come say hello. Even if you don't have kids, we want to say hi to you and get to know you, and to just embrace you into our community. And yeah, it's going to be a really good time. The festival itself runs August 18th to 21st. So those are the dates of our festival. Come on out in person. Digital tickets will be available as well. And we hope to see you all there. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you, Garrett and Mahima, for joining me today and to just like spend some time together. It was really wonderful. Merci, miigwech, and we will see you all on the next episode. Bye.